I'm Julie Barkey with this Senate update. The walleye fishing season on Mille Lacs Lake is coming to an early close. Governor Mark Dayton met with the media early Monday morning to discuss his concerns for area businesses, the relationship between the Department of Natural Resources and area residents, as well as a timeline for a special legislative session.
Well, today's a dark day for Minnesota fishing and certainly for the people in Mille Lacs. My heart goes out to those whose lives and livelihoods depend upon fishing on Lake Mille Lacs, and I know it's going to be a very hard couple of months for them. But I also believe that this is the beginning of a brighter future for quality walleye fishing on Mille Lacs, which has been the tradition of the lake and the reputation of the lake, and which will return again. I'm determined, working with the commissioner, to do everything we possibly can to turn this situation around. It's not going to turn around overnight, but we can turn it around as rapidly as proactive efforts make possible. I have a conference call this afternoon with the 4 leaders, talk further about the special session to provide emergency financial assistance to resorters and others who are going to be seriously affected by this closure. And I emphasize this closure for walleye fishing only, and the bass fishing, I'm told, is excellent, and the northerns. And I'm going to go up there on Saturday, fish myself, and invite the legislative leaders to come with me and have a chance not only to have fun and catch some fish, but also talk with people up there about their situation and the urgent need for legislative approval of this financial assistance package. I'll be in Mexico next week, but I hope that the legislative leaders will be working with my administration on this package, and we can have a special session the week after I return, 2 weeks from now, to approve this financial assistance. Also, we'll proceed to set up the advisory group I discussed last week with the citizens up in the Mille Lacs area, so we can have them involved in creating both this package, financial assistance package, as well as starting to design a way we can work to turn the situation around as rapidly as possible. Commissioner, do you want anything you want to add?
Thank you, Governor. Maybe just a couple things. As the Governor said, we're very disappointed to be at this point. Fishing in Minnesota is a very big business, a $2.4 billion a year business, but more importantly, it's really kind of the cloth of who we all are, and so we very much are disappointed by this action we have to take. We do know that we've got a little bit of bright light on the horizon. In addition to, as the Governor said, there's good fishing for other species there. Smallmouth bass fishing, it's number 10 out of 100 spots in the U.S., so we really encourage people to continue to go up to the Mille Lacs area. We've got a very strong 2013 year class of fish. They're about 10 to 13 inches now. They'll be a full pound in a year. As we look a year, 2 years down the road, we can see perhaps a recovery already happening. So we'll be doing more assessment in September to gauge the population status, and that will give us an indication of what seasons will look like in the future. But we're hopeful that the lake is beginning a recovery, and with some short-term assistance, we'll get through this and come out the other end.
Questions? Yes.
Governor, a lot of the business owners up there say that the things you've talked about for financial aid, such as zero interest loans and tax abatements, aren't enough, that they're going to need some real cash to keep their businesses open without money flowing in.
Well, that's the working group should certainly be getting that kind of input. We understood that those who have loans now, the zero interest loans can be used to create lower blended interest rates. If their situations are so dire that they need cash grants in order to survive, that's a case they need to make to the legislature. That's we're not going to be able to save people through the public dollar, and this is not going to be an immediate turnaround. So if people are in that dire financial situation, I think they're going to have to make a difficult assessment about what their viability is. So we can help, but we're not going to be able to reach in and just absolutely just if we did that, we'd have a lot of businesses all over the state clamoring for the same kind of assistance. We went through this with the turkey growers, given their crisis, and we decided that zero interest loans was as far as we could go. But again, they're welcome to make their case to the legislative leaders.
Governor, something that the resort owners told us is that they can't pay back a loan if they don't have the business. So that's the conundrum.
Well, it is, and again, there's no way to sugarcoat this. This is a very, very difficult situation, and they're going to have to make these assessments. They say that their winter season, ice fishing, snowmobiling, and the like, is in fact a more lucrative season than the summer. It surprised me, but that's the time when the new year for fishing in the limits and all starts December 1st. So there's a more flexibility there, and that's, as the commissioner said, part of what the assessment will be making, and they will be part of, as I said, an advisory group to participate in making that assessment and making those decisions. So the goal here is to help them hang on, if possible, through these next couple of summer months. Then the season slows down anyway, and then the winter's another season and opportunity. But again, we're not going to be able to, single-handedly rescue people whose situations are just too dire. They're going to have to make that assessment for themselves. But we're going to do everything we possibly can.
Governor, typically when lawmakers talk about working groups and task forces, it means we don't want to make a decision in terms of, or we don't want to take any big, strong steps on some of this stuff. I mean, do you get the sense that legislative leaders are actually as committed to this as you are?
Well, I have every reason to believe they are. I mean, it's not, they're problematic to call a special session. There's no place for them to meet. So there's some real issues to work out, but I believe they're committed. They've always stepped forward in the past, whether it's the flooding in southeastern Minnesota, the flooding up in northeastern Minnesota, with the floods last year, the avian influenza this year, which was occurred during the session. So I have every reason to believe that they'll recognize the severity of the situation and be willing to step forward with me to do everything we possibly can to provide whatever help we can.
Has there been, or will there be any discussion about moving the date of the open for next year's open water season?
There hasn't been any discussion at this point. I mean, this is one lake, so it isn't going to drive the season for the entire state. But is there any? I don't know if there's any.
It's premature to talk about next year's season until we do the assessment this fall. Really get a handle on the population.
And it's really crucial that people stay off the lake during the spawning season, which is why the tribe's announcement is so very, very important and very much appreciated.
What about the other tribes fishing on the lake, Governor? We heard that also from many of the lake residents.
Well, again, the Mille Lacs is one of 8 tribes. They are the largest tribe. They're the one closest to the lake. I talked with Chairwoman Benjamin about this, and she's going to be consulting with the other tribes. But I'm optimistic that they will recognize the same responsibility that the tribal elders at Mille Lacs band advised regarding this. But we got months to come to make those decisions. I'll certainly be glad to meet with them as well. But I'm hopeful that they will recognize the wisdom of this course of action.
Commissioner, are you able to set out for us how much of the walleye coming out of the lake goes to the tribes and how much to others who fish the lake? There seems to be, no matter what the facts are, a feeling there that the Indians have overfished the lake, and particularly the netting early on during spawning season.
Well, thank you. And I think there's, oftentimes people make those assumptions without really looking at the information. On an annual basis, we determine what we call a safe allowable harvest, and that is the number of adults that can come out safely without reducing the ability for spawning the next year. So the safe allowable harvest is what is this allowable surplus on an annual basis. We set that in conjunction with the bands on an annual basis. This year it was set at 40,000 pounds. Now, under the settlement agreement, the 1837 treaty agreement, the bands are entitled to up to 50% of that safe allowable harvest. So the bands could have claimed, 20,000 pounds. In the time since the court settlement in 1999, the bands have declared an average of 28.5%. So the bands have never declared the amount that they're eligible to declare. So they've taken out of this 40,000 pounds, that was our allocation for this year, the bands declared 11,400 pounds. And the state anglers were allowed to take 28,600 pounds. So the state anglers are taking, more than 2 times as many fish as the tribal netters are. So if we simply want to look at where the majority of fish are going, the majority of them are being taken by anglers.
Does the timing of the take for the netting have anything to do with this? During spawning season, any of that?
There are people that want to make that claim, but the data does not support that. When we look at the data, there is no problem with spawning or with the hatching of the fry. And if in fact there was a problem with netting during the spawning season, we would see a reduction in the number of eggs being laid, the number of eggs hatching into fry. That's not the case. Mille Lacs produces a great abundance of fry each year. The problem that we're seeing, and again this is supported by the data, is that those young fry, those 1-inch fish, are not turning into 10-inch fish. And so we've got this gap of teenagers, if you will, over the last 6 years that we think is just a function of the predator-prey relationship in the lake, who's eating who, and simply something that can only be adjusted over time. So as I mentioned, we see in 2013, a lot of those 1-inch fish are now 10 to 13-inch fish. In fact, it's the most abundant year class that we've ever documented in 30 years. So it's a big chunk of fish out there right now. A year from now, they will be a pound in size. So we know that we've got some greater numbers of fish coming in the near term, but we also recognize that until we know what's happening with the year 14 and year 15 age class, we can't ding that population too much. That's the future of the lake right now.
Commissioner, Ron Shera and some of the other people out there say that because of the netting, it's really hard to know how much is being taken out from netting, and that the ceasing netting has helped in other lakes in the state. So the question is, will there be any talks with the tribal bands to try to get them to make this temporary suspension permanent?
Well, all of the take of fish out of the lake is very closely, planned and monitored. So, we conduct creel surveys, so we go out and we monitor anglers on the lake and find out what they're catching. But the band take is actually much easier to evaluate because they come in on a boat, they weigh it in at the ramp, and we know exactly what the band is taking. So it's hard to understand why people would think that that's not a well-monitored take. It is a well-monitored take, and I think I would speak for both the bands and the department. Our livelihood there is in having a healthy lake, and it doesn't pay for any of us to be trying to take more than the lake can support, because that's just going to hurt us in the future.
Governor, there's understandably some strong feelings up there about this decision, and some have even suggested that you part with your DNR commissioner. Do you maintain confidence in his stewardship of this lake and the DNR itself?
I do, and absolutely have great confidence in Commissioner Landwehr. I think he's doing a virtually impossible job, as well as anyone I've ever seen in all my years in state government. I'm very concerned about the people on site because of the lack of support by the people in that area. I think a lot of people in DNR who need a course in customer relations or constituent relations, and in this case I think there's so much distrust up there directed at not just the outcome. And if your team is your sports team is your football team is 0-16, you're not going to be enthusiastic about the people who are in charge of that situation. And I think that's time where people like the commissioner and myself need to look at changing the lineup, and also bringing in people with not only with a fresh perspective, but with fresh relations with people there, so that we can that's part of restoring the confidence. I haven't had a chance to discuss this in any depth with the commissioner. We're going to get through this immediate crisis, but whenever I hear that people are not being heard by the people who pay their salaries. And especially under these dire circumstances, that to me needs a remedy. And so that will be part of what I'll be looking at with the commissioner in the next couple of weeks.
Governor, are you still requesting that the special session be only on this issue?
Yes. I'm not only requesting, I'm insisting. This is not a redo of the agency budgets. This is not going to go into military possession of firearms, which I might point out any member of the military can go to their county sheriff and qualify for a license to have concealed carry. So to me, it's a really exaggerated issue. It's not going to be about other issues unrelated to the situation, to the remedy for it. And if there is anything inserted into one of those bills, I'll veto the bill, and then they'll have to come back and do it again. This is not going to be an open season on everything everybody would like to do that they didn't do before or that they'd like to do before next year.
Let me go back to the walleye fishing and the DNR people on site. Commissioner, you must have been aware that for years the people have felt this way. Have you done something to address it before now? And are you looking at replacing the team that deals with Mille Lacs?
If I could just digress for a moment, my second day on the job, the governor stuck me in a plane and flew me up to Roseau County and subsequently to Kitson County. Both of us went.
I went with you.
He went with. Yeah. He came with. Yep. And we got into the Roseau County board meeting. He sat me in front of the board and said, "Now improve relations." And I'm happy to say I was up there 2 weeks ago, Roseau County, Kitson County, Marshall County, and Clearwater County, and things are much better up there right now. So I think what the governor has heard is there's a lack of trust, there's perhaps a lack of communication and a lack of some transparency, and we can work on those things. We've already got some ideas we're going to discuss with the governor and really try to improve the relation there. Now the unfortunate thing is when there's bad news, we still have to put that out. I think it's as much in the how we tell people that as it is in the message itself.
Commissioner, can you explain to people who don't understand the situation in the lake, what happened to the fish? I mean, this is a pretty basic question, but was it netting? Was it the fact that in the past, past people who made these decisions just decided they're going to, ignore the problem? Or was it something else? I mean, what happened to the walleye in this lake?
You bet. And I wish there was a simple answer at that time. It's the lake is a very complex ecosystem, and we've got not only the walleye in there, we've got a number of key predator species, like northerns, like muskies, like smallmouth bass. We've got a number of prey species like perch and like cisco and like small bait fish. And the lake is changing. We know the lake is changing. The water's been getting more clear over the last 30 years as a result of cleanup in septic systems and so on. We've got invasive species in there. We've got spiny water flea, which recent evidence suggests they're really having an impact on the phytoplankton, the small things that bugs eat, that then minnows eat, and then fish eat. So the lake is changing. There has been evidence that there has been a decline in male walleyes for something on 20 years now. That really became obvious to me when I came in 4 years ago that something's happening in the lake and we ought to be starting to focus a little bit more on it. And so we've seen these indicators suggesting that the lake is changing. It takes quite a while to document a decline because the lake has so much annual variation, and it takes a long time to collect meaningful information on what's happening. The best evidence I can give you right now is that going back to that reality that the small fish are not turning into big fish, and there's a predator-prey imbalance, if you will, that is resulting in those small fish, call them fingerlings, size of your finger, are being eaten by bigger fish. We did some recent analysis to find out who was eating who, to see if it was smallmouth bass. It is not smallmouth bass. They eat predominantly crayfish. To see if it was northerns. Northerns certainly eat walleye fry, but it's not a favored species, and they are not having enough of an impact. There's some evidence that, in fact, it's those remaining adult walleyes that are feeding heavily on the young walleyes, and that is in part a function of a lack of other bait fish. So perch numbers are down. We're seeing perch numbers declining across the state in some areas. Cisco numbers are down, and that could be because the lake is getting warmer. So there's a lot of changes going on. The short story is the young walleyes are not turning into mature walleyes, and that is only a function of the ecology of the lake. It's not a function of what we humans are taking out of the lake, whether it's by net or by hook and line.
And
We'll move on to
do you
questions.
stock this lake? Is it stocked?
We do not stock Mille Lacs, 140,000 acres. It produces more fry on an annual basis than our entire fish hatchery system in the state.
So if you stocked it, it wouldn't have what would happen to that? 'Cause the
Stocking will only help in those situations where it's going to replace natural production. So in the case of Red Lake, where the natural production was essentially eliminated, we went in and did some aggressive stocking, and it actually replenished that lake. We're planning and preparing for the possibility of having to stock if we should get to that point where the natural reproduction is not adequate.
What do they do normally to control the cormorant birds? The birds?
What do they do?
Well, yeah, how would you control that?
Where they are controlled, and I think Leech Lake is an example, there are sharpshooters with silenced rifles that go out and they shoot them.
We'll move on to questions on other topics here.
One more on this
Okay.
here. Well, you're encouraging people to still go to Mille Lacs and fish for some of these other species. For those people who still want to catch walleye, where should they go? What other lakes where is the population robust? I mean, there's a lot of lakes in this.
They can stay at their resorts and relax.
You bet. The good news is walleye fishing, most places in Minnesota right now is outstanding. And so there are a lot of places to go walleye fishing. I would still encourage people to stay at the resorts in Mille Lacs, and Garrison Isle and Malmo and so on. And even right in that area, there are some good smaller lakes that you can launch a boat on public access. Mille Lacs is one of what we call the big 6 lakes. So it's Lake of the Woods, Upper and Lower Red, Winnebagoshers, Leech, Minnetonka, that are just outstanding fishing lakes. Vermilion is one of those as well, where the walleye fishing, is frankly very good. And in fact, we know that, especially over the winter,
I caught fish on Lake Vermilion on opener. I mean, that proof positive right there.
What more need I say? But we know that anglers are very mobile, and so we see a lot of people moving to lakes like Red Lake and Lake of the Woods when they're limited elsewhere.
And I think this point needs to be made that, Leech Lake was in this situation 10 years ago. The circumstances may have been different. I don't have that expertise, but DNR's efforts turned that lake around. Red Lake, as the commissioner said, again, different situation, but that lake was almost devoid of fish. These walleyes, 20 years ago?
About 20 years.
And that's been turned around. So, I'm not an expert. I don't have that expertise, but I think it's totally unacceptable to sit back and do nothing. I mean, as I said before, if your team's 0-16, you don't stand pat for the next season. And we're going to look at every possible way we can turn this lake around as rapidly as possible and show people there and show their customers in Minnesota and elsewhere that we are taking every possible aggressive action to turn this situation around as rapidly as possible. We're going to set a new tenor to the relationship there between the DNR, their government, and the people there whose lives and livelihoods depend upon the success in that lake, and we're going to involve them, and we're going to appreciate very much, again, Mille Lacs tribe's willingness to participate with us in this. And today, as I said, is the beginning of a much better tomorrow for Lake Mille Lacs.